Tonight we are looking at three horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. In Canada, a warm wind melts the ice plug, sealing the only cave on Earth beneath a living glacier, and drowns the one door 3 surveyors have. In Borneo, a monsoon parks over the mountain while 2 cavers sleep 6 kilometers inside the longest cave system in Asia, and the river starts coming up. And in Spain, a jam descender leaves a rigger hanging in the middle of a 90-meter shaft, with a harness clock already counting down. Each story starts with confidence and ends in chaos. As always, viewer discretion is advised. On March 8, 2026, Elena Mercer walked into the mouth of Sistema Cheve in Oaxaca, the deepest cave in the Americas, a mountain drain that swallows a river at 3,000 meters and carries it a vertical 1.5 miles down through the limestone. She was the dive end of an 8-person push, 4 days of hauling to the terminal camp, then 1 dive through the Sump that had stopped every expedition for 30 years. Elena was 37 years old, a cave diver who had logged 900 dives and 4 Cheve expeditions across 11 years, the one the leaders trusted at the sharp end. Her habit was a rope and a rule, a tether from her harness to a hand on the bank, 1 tug for stop, 3 for haul, because a diver in a mountain sump, she taught the young ones, is a voice you can only hear through a line. The plan gave her 40 minutes in the water and gave the team 4 days to walk her back out. Here is what you need to understand about a sump in a mountain river cave. It is the low point where the passage dips under the water table, a green throat the river runs through whether or not a person is inside it. On a dry week, it is a still green pool you can swim in 90 seconds. On a wet one, it becomes a pipe under pressure, and the mountain does not send a message ahead. The carry-down took 4 days. Boulder slopes and rope pitches, tackle bags scraping over polished stone, the river running loud beside them. Camp built at minus 1,400 meters on a beach of black sand. On the morning of day 5, Elena kitted up at the sump pool, gate clicking home on the tether, regulator hissing once as she tested it, and put her light into water the color of green glass. 18 minutes into the dive, that is, when the mountain answered a storm nobody at camp had felt, the pool at the team's feet lifted a hand's width and turned brown, because a cell had already failed the forecast on the plateau 3,000 meters above them. The tether began to run out through the belayer's fingers, faster than a swimming diver pays out line. What they didn't know, hauling in wet rope hand over hand, the flood pulse had reached the sump before it reached them. And that knot would now do the only talking left. 1 tug for stop, 3 for haul. A line going slack in a current that had already taken the far end. The pool rose to their knees. The tether went slack. Panic hit the beach. She was gone. The river had taken the throat behind her. Because this is what a flood pulse does to a sump. It does not fill slowly. It arrives as a surge down a mile of mountain and turns a 90-second swim into a pressurized pipe. 1 diver on the far side of a flooded throat, 7 people on a shrinking beach at minus 1,400 meters, and 4 days of climbing between them and daylight. Watch what the team did with the only things they had. First, pull the tether all the way in and read it. 30 meters of rope, the end cut clean by rock. Second, move camp 40 meters up the boulder slope, because a beach at a rising sump is not a camp. It is a trap with sleeping bags on it. Put yourself on that slope for 1 hour of it. A pool where your friend went in, now a brown boil you cannot see a light through. A cut rope end in your fist. And a mountain roaring above you with 4 days of climbing in it. They waited 19 hours for the pulse to pass, watching the water drop centimeter by centimeter down a boulder they had marked with a headlamp. The second diver went in at hour 20 with a fresh line, swam the throat in 4 minutes, and surfaced in the chamber beyond, into air that smelled of wet rock and nothing else. He found her 40 meters past the far side, still on her own guideline, in a side alcove she had reached and held against the current until her gas ran out. The carryout took the team 6 days, 140 rope pitches, and every caver in 3 countries who could get to Oaxaca in time. They brought her into the Oaxaca sunlight on the 12th day of an expedition that had planned for 9. Elena Mercer drowned in the terminal sump of the deepest cave in the Americas, on the far side of a throat that closed behind her in 18 minutes. Her team survived on a slope they moved to in the dark. The rope told them everything except how to reach her. The expedition report ruled the death a flood pulse drowning at a terminal sump, and the project rewrote its diving rule in one line the year after. No sump dive without a surface weather relay to the camp, and no dive at all inside 72 hours of rain on the plateau. The deepest cave in the Americas still takes its river down 1.5 miles of limestone, and still ends at a green pool nobody has passed. The project dives it again each spring, with a radio on the beach and a man watching the sky 3,000 meters above. A diver in a sump is a voice you hear through a line, Elena used to tell the young ones on the bank. Hold the rope, read what it says, and when the mountain starts talking over it, pull her home before it finishes. On October 5, 2026, Nadia Okonkwo waded into the mouth of Clearwater Cave in Malaysian Borneo, the longest cave system in Asia, more than 200 kilometers of passage carrying an underground river out of the Mulu Mountains. She was leading a 2-person survey push to a side gallery 6 kilometers in, 2 days of mapping, sleeping on a sandbank, and out along the river the way they came. Nadia was 31 years old, a survey caver who had logged 4 Mulu expeditions in 6 years, the one the leaders sent into New Passage first. Her habit was a mark and a stone. At every camp she scratched the water level on the wall and set a pebble at the edge, because a tropical river cave tells you what it is doing an hour before it does it. The plan gave them 40 hours below, with the exit wade timed for a dry season afternoon. Here is what you need to understand about a Bornean river cave. The passages are enormous, wide as railway tunnels, and the river through them is knee-deep and gentle in dry weather. Then a monsoon cell parks over the mountain, and the same passage carries 100 times the water within hours. The cave does not warn anybody. The rain falls on a rainforest nobody underground can see. The push in was easy walking, 6 kilometers of wide river passage, scraping boots on gravel bars, the roof high above their lamps, swiftlets clicking somewhere overhead. They reached the side gallery by afternoon, surveyed until midnight, and slept on the sandbank with a pebble set at the water's edge. At 4 in the morning, that is when the river answered a rain nobody had felt. Nadia woke to find her pebble gone, and the mark on the wall underwater, because a cell had stalled over Mulu at midnight, and the dry season forecast had already failed them. The water was up 30 centimeters in 4 hours, and rising faster now, brown where it had been clear. What she didn't know, watching the level climb her scratched line, the cell would sit on the mountain for 18 hours, and that habit would now be the only instrument they had. The mark, the pebble, the hour-by-hour arithmetic of a river deciding whether to let them out. The sandbank was shrinking. Their exit had failed. Panic wanted them to run. Running meant drowning in it. She marked the wall again instead and wrote the hour beside the number. Because this is what a flooding river passage does to an exit. It does not block the way with a wall. It turns 6 kilometers of gentle walking into 6 kilometers of current that takes your feet at thigh depth and your life at chest depth. 2 surveyors on a shrinking sandbank, 6 kilometers of river between them and the jungle, and a surface camp that expected them back that evening. Watch the mark do the work. Nadia scratched the wall every 30 minutes and wrote the number in the survey book. Up 8 centimeters. Up 11, up 6. They moved camp twice, each time to a higher ledge scouted before it was needed, and packed the survey gear into dry bags in case the ledge had to be abandoned in the dark. Between readings, they ate cold rations and said little, because talking burns the same warmth that waiting needs,
and there was nothing to decide until the wall said so. Put yourself on that ledge for 1 hour of it. A river you walked through yesterday now roaring below your boots. A wall of scratches that is the only clock in the world that matters. And a partner watching your face each time you go down to read it. At hour 14, the numbers turned. Up 3 centimeters, then up 1, then a scratch that stayed dry for a full half hour, the first good news in half a day. At hour 20, the river had dropped 40 centimeters. Nadia waded out to a gravel bar to test the current against her legs, roped to her partner, and came back with one word: not yet. They started the exit wade at hour 23, roped together, moving on the inside of every bend where the water ran slowest, 6 kilometers of careful feet in brown water. 4 hours later, the passage brightened to green, and they walked out into a dripping rainforest and a search party 20 minutes from launching. Nadia's first request on the surface was for a pencil, to copy the wall's numbers into the expedition record before she slept, 28 hours after the pebble went missing.
They survived on a scratched line, and the patience to read it. And the expedition report ruled the entrapment an unforecast monsoon flood survived by camp discipline, and printed her wall of numbers as the region's flood curve, the same curve that has kept every party since from being trapped. Up in 6 hours means stay, 3 falling marks means prepare, 24 hours means go. The longest cave system in Asia still carries its river out to the jungle, 200 kilometers of indifference. Nadia leads Mulu, pushes herself now, and every camp begins with a scratch on the wall and a pebble at the water's edge. The river tells you an hour early, she says at every briefing. Mark it, read it, and when it tells you to wait, sit down on your ledge and let it finish talking. On July 14, 2026, Diego Salas leaned back over the lip of Torca del Cerro in the Picos de Europa, one of the deepest cave systems in Spain, a stack of shafts that drops more than 1.5 kilometers through the limestone of northern Iberia. He was rigging the midsection for a summer expedition, descend the big pitches alone, replace worn anchors, and be back on the surface in 10 hours. Diego was 29 years old, a rope technician who had logged 600 pitches across 7 years, the youngest rigger his club trusted with a solo day. His habit was a knot, a foot loop tied to his harness and stowed in a chest pocket on every descent, because a hanging caver with 2 free hands is a problem, and one with no free hands is a countdown. The plan was 6 pitches down, 4 anchors replaced, and a climb back out before his 10-hour check-in. Here is what you need to understand about hanging in a harness. It is not like sitting. The leg loops press the big veins of the thighs, and blood begins to pool in the legs instead of returning to the heart. Motionless in a harness, a healthy person has maybe 30 minutes before the fainting starts, and less than an hour before it turns dangerous. The rescue books call it suspension trauma. Cavers call it the clock. The first 4 pitches went perfectly. Gates clicking home, the descender purring on clean rope, 2 anchors swapped and logged, his lamp finding old bolts in the wall like fossils of other expeditions. On the 5th pitch, 90 meters of free hang, he started down into a shaft where a summer trickle had left the rope muddy for its whole length. 40 meters down that hang, that is when the clock started. Grit worked into the descender, the rope stopped feeding, and the device locked solid, because the muddy rope had already failed the tolerance the manufacturer allows. He hung in the middle of a 90-meter shaft, 40 meters of air below, 50 above, and nothing to stand on in any direction. What he didn't know, hauling uselessly at a jammed handle, the grit had packed hard enough that no amount of hand strength would clear it, and that habit would now decide the next 30 minutes, the foot loop in his chest pocket, tied for exactly this. The descender would not move. His legs began to tingle. The device had failed. Panic arrived on time. The clock had started without asking him first. Because this is what suspension trauma does to a solo caver. It does not injure you where you can see it. It drains you quietly, and the first symptom is the same clumsiness you need your hands to overcome. One rigger 40 meters up a free hang, one jammed device holding his whole weight, and a check-in time 7 hours away. Watch the training run itself. Move 1. The foot loop out of the chest pocket and onto the rope above the descender, so his weight could stand instead of hang. Move 2. Stand in the loop and take the load off the device, the leg loops loosening against his thighs, the tingle backing off, the clock stopping mid-count. Put yourself on that rope for 1 minute of it. 40 meters of nothing under your boots. A device that will not open with your whole strength on it. And the exact loop of webbing you have carried, unused, on 600 descents. Standing in the loop, unloaded, he opened the descender with a snap and scraped it clean with a thumbnail, grit rolling off the cam in gray beads. Reloaded, the rope hissing through it under a hand's weight and then a body's, it fed clean again, and he chose to climb the 50 meters back to the ledge above rather than trust the rest of that muddy rope going down. The climb took him 50 minutes on ascenders, standing every 20 meters to keep the blood moving, counting the exact drill his instructors had made him hate. He reached the ledge, sat down flat on the rock for the first time in an hour, and radioed the surface with a line that went into club legend. "Rope's dirty. I'm fine." I stood up. He walked out under his own power 4 hours later, ahead of his check-in, with 2 anchors unreplaced and no argument from anybody. He survived on a loop of webbing and 30 seconds of training, and the club's incident report ruled the jam a foreseeable equipment failure on a silted rope, and rewrote the solo rigging rule after 40 minutes of hanging. No solo descent without a foot loop tied and stowed, and any rope carrying summer mud gets cleaned first. One of the deepest pits in Spain still drops its 90-meter hangs into the dark, still silting ropes every summer until another descender has failed. Diego survived to teach the rigging course, and the club's report is read aloud on its first morning, 2 meters off the ground, where every student hangs until their legs tingle and then stands up in a loop. Hanging is a countdown, he tells them, and every year someone dies in a harness that held them perfectly. Standing is not a countdown. Carry the loop you have never needed and tie it before you leave the light.